you probably will think it's the best thing ever, and the other half probably will have nightmares over this feature. So just know that it's there. You don't have to enable it. It is not on by default. We system admins have control over that. We can allow our users to invite coworkers. It's a little checkbox, very easy to set up. And what that means is that our users now can invite coworkers to join Chatter. When they send out the invitation, a user record will be created and the Chatter free license will be assigned to that coworker. And then they can log into Salesforce and they have access to Chatter. The other option is allowing invites to customers. Again, super simple. It's just another checkbox, right? And that would allow your users to invite customers into Chatter groups, into specific Chatter groups. And those users, those customers would be set up as Chatter external users in Salesforce, and they would then have access to the Chatter group. Now, as I said, for some of you, you're probably thinking, wow, this is the best thing ever, and we really can bring collaboration to a whole nother level. And for other people, especially those that are in healthcare or that are in finance, where we have all sorts of privacy laws and HIPAA laws, that's probably the biggest nightmare ever for you. And again, it's not enabled by default. It is just something that if it works for you, you can enable it. And if it gives you nightmares, then just don't enable it. Don't use it. And then we have feed tracking for objects and fields. Feed tracking for objects and fields basically allows you to have Salesforce automatically send a Chatter notification whenever a record is changed. And we have the new value, well, the old value, the new value, who changed it, and the date that would be included in that Chatter message. Now, I personally don't really like feed tracking very much because we actually have another feature. It is called field history tracking. Field history tracking is also tracking that same kind of information, but it is tracking it as a change record. And the reason why I like that better is because I can run reports and analytics on the change records, but I cannot run reports and analytics on Chatter notifications. And sometimes we need both, right? Sometimes we want to make our users happy, and a proactive Chatter notification that they can easily see in their Chatter feed is making them happy. And I don't really care so much. I care more about the detailed change records, which really is the same information. It's not proactive, but I don't need proactive because I'm running those reports and the analytics, right? And so sometimes we just have both enabled. And then we have the Chatter groups, and they're basically just, think of them as like chat rooms, and I'm totally aging myself here. But Chatter groups are basically collaboration spaces where people can go and they can collaborate around different topics. And then, of course, we have Slack as well. So you can integrate Slack into Salesforce, and then you can use the Slack functionality within Salesforce for collaboration. Now, we also need to talk about activities. And activities is a very interesting object. Think of it as an object with a split personality. And the reason why I say that is because tasks and events make up activities. So tasks is basically your to-do list, or the to-do list that your users have, right? They're user created. They can actually also be created by flows and by automation. And those tasks are open until your user goes in and marks them as complete. Now, we also have log a call and email, and those are also tasks, but they're different tasks. Those are tasks that are never open. Those are tasks that are always closed or completed. And when you think about an email, that makes total sense, right? So if you go into Salesforce and you're typing up your email, type, and then you hit the send button, then that email is being sent, it's out, but it also is saved as a task, but it's sent, so it's done. And that's why emails as well as log a call, and those are always completed tasks. Now, events, on the other hand, are very different because events are literally blocking off time in your calendar. Events don't have a due date like tasks. Events have a start and an end date that show in your calendar. And when you're running reports on activities, then you can kind of narrow it down to either tasks or events or both. And the only thing you want to watch out for when you're running a report on events is that if you have a multi-day event, then when we get to the start day and time, then that event is marked as completed. Even though if it's a 5-day event, we have another 5 days to go, right? But it's already marked as a completed event. So just keep that in mind. It's kind of odd. Well, at least in my box, it's odd. All right, now, the mobile app. There is typically not a whole lot that we need to customize, but just be aware that there are certain things that we could customize. For example, we could change the order of items listed in the navigation menu, basically the tabs that we typically would think of. Also, we can customize the compact layout to display the most useful information. But to be honest with you, we already customized the compact layout typically because it is what controls the highlight panel on the record. And so this is typically already done anyways. Then we have a Launchpad configuration, and think of the Launchpad kind of as a shortcut to get very quickly to different places. And this potentially could be useful in a mobile app because the mobile app, the screen is so small, there's a lot of clicking and scrolling going on. So if you can have shortcuts that bring you very quickly to where you want to go, then obviously that is useful. And then you can add and customize the actions in the publisher. Again, we typically have already customized them anyways for the desktop app already. I don't know that we necessarily need anything different for the mobile app, but just know that it would be an option. And then, of course, we have the App Exchange. And on the App Exchange, you can find all sorts of add-ons and additional solutions that are either tailored to your industry or flow solutions so that you can use those flows as starting points so you don't have to reinvent the wheel and completely start from scratch. There's a whole bunch of free analytics packages and dashboards. There's call recording solutions. Those oftentimes are not free. Then we have admin tools, productivity tools, custom lightning components, you name it. So whenever you have something bigger that you want to create in Salesforce, always check the App Exchange because you don't necessarily need to create it completely from scratch. There might be something that's either exactly the way you need it or similar to what you need, so then you can use that and then just customize it so that it fits your actual needs. And that was already it. Any questions? Okay. Well, then that leads us right into data and analytics management. And there is Rose again. And this time Rose is telling us, hey, NTO has a spreadsheet of recent leads they'd like to import into Salesforce. Can you handle this for them? And of course, the answer is yes, absolutely, we can. There's really two options on how we can make the magic happen. The first one is the data import wizard. Now, both of the tools that we will be talking about today have pros and cons. And the pros for the data import wizard is that we can choose whether or not to trigger, here it says workflow rules and processes. Remember, those two are retired, but they have been replaced by record triggered flows. So this is still valid. It's just record triggered flows now. So that is a big plus because oftentimes we don't want to trigger automation when it comes to importing records. The other big plus is that it can prevent duplicates by selecting the matching type right here. And it's a plus. It's just not customizable, which I sometimes wish, you know, that would be a whole nother level. But it's better than nothing. So what this means is, let's say that we need to import those leads that Rose was just talking about. We can say that the matching type should be email. And so as the system is importing all of those different leads, before it actually creates each lead, it will double check, is there already another lead with that same email address? And if yes, then it will merge those two together. If the answer is no, then we'll just create a new one. But if the answer is yes, there's already a record with that email address, then we're not creating a duplicate. We will merge those two records together. So that's the matching type. It does only look either at the email or the name, not both of them. And we could use the Salesforce ID or we could use the external ID. So those are the matching types dependent on the object. Now let's talk about some cons. The first con is the objects. It's not all objects that we have in Salesforce. The import wizard only works with accounts, contacts, leads, solutions, campaign members, and custom objects. That's it. That's it. Cases, not on the list. Opportunities, not on the list. Okay, so it's not all objects. It's just these right here. And then the import wizard can only handle fewer than 50,000 records. Now, granted, that may or may not be a drawback. Typically, we don't have that many leads when we come back from a trade show, but there might be other times where we would need more than 50,000. And the import wizard cannot do more than 50,000. Now, let's say that you have 80,000. You totally could do 40,000 first and then the other 40,000 right after. But you would have to split it into two files. So that's the import wizard. The other option that we have, or the other tool that we have, is called the data loader. And with the data loader, again, we have pros and cons, right? And my slide is hanging again, but I'll just keep going. So the data loader, here we go. The data loader's pro is that it can do so much more. We can insert, and that's like import. We can update. But the data loader can also delete. It can also export, and it can also upsert. Upsert is a combination of insert and update. So insert if it doesn't exist, update if it does exist. And it's looking for the Salesforce ID to identify if it's existing. Doesn't look at the email. So it's not deduping, and that's a drawback of the data loader, actually. Cannot use it for deduping. However, the data loader does support all objects that are open through the API, so both standard and custom objects. And it can handle up to 5 million records. Now, because the Salesforce, the data loader allows you to export, the data loader would be a tool that you could use to obtain the Salesforce record IDs. Now let's talk about the record IDs. And every time a record is created, an ID is assigned to that record. Salesforce automatically does that behind the scenes, and it is a unique ID. Now, with the data loader, because there's no deduping functionality, it can happen that we're creating a whole bunch of duplicates. Now, even if we have an exact duplicate, the Salesforce record ID would still be unique, right? So that's why the record ID sometimes can be really useful. We can also save mappings for later use. And there's actually two versions of the data loader, or two flavors of the data loader. This right here, the data loader screenshot that you see, that is a client-based application that requires installation and authentication. It is fully supported for both Windows and Mac. It basically means that it is literally a piece of software that you have to install on your machine. I know, it's so 90s. But anyways, the other flavor of the data loader is the cloud version. So there is data loader IO, that's what it's called, and that's the cloud version. Has slightly different limits with data loader IO. Only the first 10,000 records are free, then you have to pay, and it can only do a total of 1 million records, not 5 million. But other than that, they're pretty much the same. So here's a side-by-side comparison. Fewer than 50,000, we could use either tool, right? Duplicates and choosing whether or not to trigger automation, we would use the import wizard, because the data loader will create a duplicate and the data loader will trigger active flows and automation. And then the other things that the data loader can do is load up to 5 million records, have more objects. You can have the scheduling and import, saving mappings for later use, and of course, exporting and deleting data. is available with the data loader. Now, we're talking a lot about importing records into Salesforce, right? And remember, that means that we are creating records. So, oh, wait a moment, when we're creating records, who owns the record? Well, whoever is creating that record. And even if we're using a tool like the import wizard or like the data loader, there's still a user that is using that tool. And that user, by default, will be the owner if you do not specify a different owner. So be careful about that. And then there are reasons why an import or an update could fail. Here are the four most common ones. If we have a universally required field, but we don't have any value that we're importing, Salesforce would reject the record, and just that record, not the entire import. If a field was marked as unique, but we're trying to import a value that would not make it unique anymore, Salesforce would reject it. Then we have data validation rules. If a data validation rules evaluates to true, then it would also be rejecting that particular record. And if the pickless values are not allowed, we also would reject that particular record, not everything else in that import file. All right, here are some best practices. And if you ask me, this first one is not even really a best practice. It's really a necessity or a requirement. Create any necessary fields prior to the import. Why is this important? Well, the field is the container, and we are importing data into that container. If there is no container, we cannot import anything into it, right? Remember my big mug in the morning? Well, if I go over to the coffee machine and I press the buttons, but I do not have my container underneath it, the coffee will just go nowhere. Actually, not true. It will go into that little hole. I can't drink it, and I just have to clean up the mess afterwards at some point. So, I think the reason why they put this on the list is to make sure that you understand that neither the import wizard nor the data loader will create the container for you. They will not create fields. It will just put data into those already existing fields. You also want to make sure that you're cleaning up your data prior to the import. Cleaning data inside of Salesforce is a ginormous nightmare. Don't do it. Keep your data as clean as you possibly can, because Salesforce is not a good tool for cleaning data. So clean up the data before you put it in and avoid duplicates. Kind of same thing, right? Keep it clean. If you're using external systems, then you might use an external ID. Same concept as the Salesforce ID, but again, this is from an external system, and typically databases, external systems use that whole ID concept just like Salesforce. And so that's what that external ID is all about. And then, of course, prepare and upload a test batch. Not just to double check that your field mapping is correct and the right information hops into the right field, but also to see that your record types and your page layouts are correctly inputted. At this point, hopefully you double check the owner of those records, because again, if you forget to assign the owner, then you will own all of those 50,000 records that you imported, and you really don't want to do that. And I hope that as you're preparing and uploading that test batch, you also remember to, at the latest here, remember the automation, because if you're using the data loader, automation will trigger. All right, I have some questions for you. The first one is that NTO needs to export 50 open opportunities. Which tool should they select? And also tell me why. Why that tool and not the other? What's the reason for your answer? What would you say?
The data loader, because it can export.
Yeah, very good. The data loader, because of that export, right? The import wizard can only import. Is there another reason? Silly question. There is another reason.
The import can't do opportunities.
Yes, very good. Double whammy right here. Two reasons, right? Export and opportunities. Both of those are reasons why we have to use the data loader and we cannot use the import wizard. All right. Number 2, an admin needs to import 2000 leads without triggering any workflow rules. Which tool should he use?
Import wizard.
And why?
It won't trigger the automation.
Yes, perfect. Exactly. Very good. Love the teamwork. Excellent. All right, number 3. NGO would like to import 50 new accounts and their associated contacts into Salesforce from a CSV file. Which records should they import first? We talked about that this morning, right?
Accounts.
Yes, very good. So the way we would want to approach this is we need to import the accounts first, the parents, and then we want to export the accounts. Oh, wait, what? Export the accounts? Yes, we would want to export the accounts because we want to get our hands on that account ID that was assigned when we imported those accounts. Remember, when a record is created in Salesforce, Salesforce will assign a unique ID to that newly created record. So we want to get our hands on that ID, and we want to take that account ID and put it into the contact import file that we're about to import. And with that, we will make sure that each account ID goes to the matching contact so that when we are importing our contacts, the ID already tells the system then where under which account that contact should end up under, right? We want to make sure that the right children, the right contacts end up with the correct parent, end up with the correct account. And we use the IDs for that. All right. I always joke, yeah, you don't want to end up with the children of your neighbors, right? And then somebody the other day unmuted and said, why the neighbor's children are a lot better behaved, and so I'll switch mine. I'm like, okay, never mind. You might do that in Salesforce. We do not want to switch the children and give them to another parent. Okay, so we use the ID to be very specific that the right children end up with the right parent. Yes, I hear questions. Peely, you unmuted.
Sorry, yeah. For number 1,
Mhm.
why would we go with data loader instead of just having a report that's exported?
Oh, great question, because we haven't talked about reports. But in reality, I totally agree with you. I mean, that would be even easier than really doing anything else. Yeah, I agree with you.
Okay.
Very good. Let's see. Mark, did you have a question? I see you're unmuted.
Oh, sorry. No, I don't.
Okay, no worries. Okay. Very good. Well, then here is Rose again. And this time Rose is telling us, hey, CloudKits wants to be sure they won't lose any of their data. What are our options for backing up data from Salesforce? And so there is really 3 different options that we can consider when it comes to backing up data. The first one is running a report, saving that report, and then exporting that report either into a CSV file, an Excel spreadsheet, or an Excel workbook. And that obviously is a manual process. Now, the other option would be we are using Data Loader or Data Loader IO. And from there, we are exporting either into a CSV file, or if you can write command line code, you can export into an Excel spreadsheet or even into another database. That process is manual, or if you can write command line code, that process could be automated. And then here is the third option, and that is the data backup service or weekly export service. Was either weekly or monthly. You can actually choose depending on your Salesforce edition. And this is used to obtain a complete set of Salesforce data for archiving. And you're getting that in a CSV format, but honestly, there's so many CSV files that typically it's kind of a zip file, really, that you receive. And it says here this process can be automated. And that's what I want you to remember for the exam. Let's talk about reality here for just a moment. When you're scheduling right here, you're automating, right? When you're scheduling that export, you are saying Fridays at 6 p.m., for example. That does not mean that at 6 p.m. you will receive your backup on a silver platter. It means that your request will be added to the queue. And your export will not start until, I don't know, 8 p.m., 10 p.m., 2 a.m. the next day. Who knows? It depends on how many other requests are in the queue that are in front of you, right? So anyways, still automated though. So you are, let's say 2 a.m. and it's finally your turn. So now Salesforce will go and pull all of the accounts and all of the contacts and we'll put all of those into CSV files and then put those CSV files into zip files. And then finally it's all done and you will receive an email. Woohoo! All of that to this point, all is automated when you're scheduling it. Here's the manual part. We can't possibly attach 2 GB of your data in zip files as an attachment to the email. So when you receive the email, there is a link. You still need to manually click on that link, go to the place where those zip files are located, and then download those zip files and put them wherever you have your zip files and your backups. So there is a manual piece to it. Also, that link is only available for 48 hours. If you click onto that link after that, you need to wait another week because it's not there anymore. So don't schedule it for Friday evening, right? Because sometimes it goes pretty fast. And by the time Monday comes around, those 48 hours might already be passed. All right, now here is Rose again. And this time Rose is telling us, hey, now that we have successfully backed up our data, how can we be confident that new data is entered accurately and completely? Great question, Rose, because remember, cleaning up data is really bad. So make sure that you enforce those rules. And this is where data validation comes into play. This ensures the integrity of the data before it is saved. It will prevent your user from saving invalid field values. And you determine what invalid means. We have system data validation and we have custom validation rules. System data validation, we've already talked a little bit about them, is field data type, for example. So remember, when you are creating a custom field, you are selecting what data type this field should be. Should it be a date field? Should it be a checkbox? Should it be a pick list? And with that data type comes the system data validation. Let's say that you are choosing date as the field data type. If your users go into that date field and they start typing in a little essay and then they hit the save button, my users will get an error message. This is a date field. When you click into it, we even gave you a little calendar and then you thought you could just ignore that and put in some text. No. That's not how it works. So once they hit the save button, system validations will be evaluated and then my user will get an error message. Required field. Now, typically when we're making a field required, then we either do that on the page layout, or if we have dynamic forms, we can make a field required on dynamic forms as well. That is different. This required field right here is making a field required on the field level, meaning you go to setup, you go directly to the field, and there is also a little required field, and that's different. So this required field right here is making this field required on the field level. And that means that this field is required always and everywhere by everyone. That field will now be added onto all your page layouts. It will be required on all the page layouts. You cannot remove this field from the page layout anymore. You lose field level security because it is available for everyone, and not just available, it is enforced, it is required for everyone. This is a strong field requirement, not used very often because it is so strong, and because you lose field level security and you lose the flexibility, right? There are certain use cases, but it doesn't happen very often. But that's what that required field here means. And then the unique field, very similar. When you go to the field itself, you can check a little checkbox and make this field unique. And what that means is that before this record is saved, the system will double check if there is another record that has the same value in it. And if that's the case, then, you get an error message because that field would no longer be unique. And the system says, no, not happening. I won't save it. So those are system data validation. Now, custom validation rules are really used to enforce your particular rules and processes that you have established as an organization. For example, if we have the general rule, opportunity discount must never exceed 20%, period, then you know your sales reps, right? Of course, they will try something different. So we're setting up a validation rule. And the validation rule is a Boolean formula, meaning we have a problem if the discount percent is greater than 0.2 or 20%, right? And so if your user are trying to put in 25% and they hit the save button, then the evaluation gets done. We're looking at this Boolean statement right here. And if this is true, then we get an error message. And you can customize that error message right here. Discount must not exceed 20%. Try that one again. Oh, right. I got caught. All right. Well then, here is Rose again. And this time, Rose is telling us CloudKicks has records in their database that already exist in NTO's org. These include several accounts and contact records. How can we delete those records from Salesforce? And of course, we could use the data loader, right? With the data loader, we are able to delete, but there also is a mass delete tool. And with that mass delete tool, we can delete records, and those records, at least by default, will hop into that recycle bin. And the slide here says for 15 days. That's not true. It is for up to 15 days, unless you permanently delete. So down here is a tiny little checkbox that says permanently delete. And if you check that little checkbox and use the mass delete tool, then those records that we're deleting are basically skipping the recycle bin vacation where they would otherwise sit for up to 15 days. They immediately go and are completely deleted. Now, since we're talking about the mass tools, we also have a mass transfer tool as well. And the name gives it away. We use that tool to mass transfer records from one owner to another owner, right? All right. What questions are out there? Okay.
When,
Oh, yes.
when would we use a mass transfer tool? Like, what scenario? Like,
If somebody is leaving the organization, for example, and those customers are not leaving, but your sales rep is leaving, then customers might need to be transferred to the new sales rep that you're hiring. So that would be one reason why to use the mass transfer tool.
If you were doing that for transferring to another user, do you have to specify all the different objects, or does it just do all the objects owned by the one owner?
Great question. Yeah, no, it wouldn't transfer everything. So the mass transfer tool is available for accounts, leads, service contracts, or custom objects. And you would have to, let's say you want to do accounts and leads, you would have to do accounts first, and then you would have to go back and do the leads next.
Okay, so it's not handled
No,
behind the scenes.
no, it's not.
I've performed this before where it does transfer the child records as well, but that's a selection that's optional. So I think in some circumstances that's true. In particular, opportunities and quotes and awards and things like that.
Right. Yeah. Right here are potential other options available that you can, as you're saying, okay, from this person to the other person. There are, dependent on the object, there are additional options that you can select right here. Mhm. And those would be just related to whatever it is that we're mainly transferring. Yeah, good point. All right, what other questions are out there? Okay. There were a couple of questions that make me want to share a story. And this has nothing to do, or at least not directly, with the mass transfer and mass delete, but now is a good time to share the story. Once upon a time, no, I'm just kidding. It actually happened to me. And so that's why I want to share the story. And it has to do with some of the questions that were raised today. So you know that I was a sales rep, right, for this technology company. And I started way back in the day in the Munich office. Born and grown up in Germany, so that's kind of how I started. I found this American company and I became a sales rep in their Munich office selling BIOS. And I was doing this for, I think about 2 years or so. And then I saw that they were looking for a sales rep just like me. I mean, same market, everything. It was me. They were describing me. And I'm like, oh, this could be my ticket to the US, right? Because I wanted to move to the US. And so I called my boss and I'm like, I think this might be my opportunity. Do you think they can sponsor a visa? And my boss goes, well, I don't know, but let me talk to my counterpart in the US and we'll just figure it out. And so I had an interview and I got accepted and they sponsored my visa. And that is how I came to the US, almost more than 20 years now. Anyways, so here I am. I pack up my stuff in Europe and I turned from a EMEA sales rep into a US sales rep, right? Same company, same email address, like not much has changed, except that, of course, now I have a new manager. So Barry was my old manager in EMEA, and now my new manager was Mike. Super nice guy. Really liked working for him. And he was my new manager. I had a new team, and yeah, that's my story. Now, my question for you is, how would you handle a situation like this? Like, what are some of the things that you as a system admin would need to consider? What are some of the things that you would need to do to make that transition to basically turn Katrin EMEA into a Katrin US so that, you know, I'm now working for Mike and not for Barry anymore. And I'm reporting up in the US structure, not the EMEA structure anymore. What would be some of the things that you would need to change in Salesforce?
Like your locale.
Yeah, locale, oh, don't remind me, right? I came here and I truly thought that we had 16 months here for a moment. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to use the same like user record, or would you have to be created a new one?
La 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 la. I'm just ignoring that question for right now. Ezra, what would you change?
I was gonna say currency, but no, I'll take that.
No, actually, yeah, the default currency you would want to change because every user has a default currency. And so
Yeah.
you would want to change mine so that when I create a new opportunity, it is no longer in Deutschmarks. Oh, I'm totally aging myself. It's now euros. Anyways, but now that I'm in the US, I want my opportunities by default to be in US dollars. So definitely something to consider. Yep. What else? I'm reporting to Mike now, remember? He's my manager, not Barry. I'm in the US manager versus EMEA manager. What else would you want to change? Where do we go to kind of set up those managers?
Is that the role hierarchy?
Yeah, perfect. The role and the role hierarchy. Excellent. Very good. Okay. Very good. And obviously there's a whole bunch of other things that we would need to consider, but yeah, those are the ones that I was looking for. Okay. So I want to continue my story because what happened when the first day at work finally came around, I went to the new office and the front desk lady, Stacy, super nice. I still remember her. She's like, yeah, I already have your cubicle prepared for you. And I'm like, cubicle? I had never heard of this whole concept of cubicles before, right? But anyways, so she brought me to my cubicle. And as we were walking there, I was walking by the office where Mike was sitting in. It was like big glass doors. And Stacey goes, oh yeah, this is Mike. He's on a call right now, but you know, he'll come out later and welcome you. And so she brought me to my cubicle and I sit down. And as I was sitting down, the phone rings and I'm like, oh my goodness, my first phone call. So I pick up the phone and Barry was on the call and he was close to having a heart attack. I'm like, Barry, calm down. What's going on? And he's like, I don't know what's going on, but I just lost $1 million of closed business. And I'm like, Barry, that doesn't make any sense. Like it's closed business. Closed business means the contract is signed, the product is shipped, the invoice is potentially already paid. Like you can't lose that. And he's like, I know it doesn't make any sense, but I kind of dug into it and I realized that all of your stuff is gone. And I'm like, huh? Let me log in. So I logged into Salesforce and I'm like, no, it's all there. And then it dawned on me. Now I suddenly started realizing why Mike was so happy to see me. He just gained $1 million of closed business. Woo-hoo! All right. Well, question for you. What do you think happened? And after we figure that out, how do we fix it? What do you think happened?
You probably got to transfer the ownership of the records that you had in the other office to somebody else so that it did not follow you on.
Here we go. Here we go. So that's the problem, right? They followed me. And because we changed my role in the role hierarchy, I am no longer reporting to Barry. I am now reporting to Mike and I own those opportunities. So those opportunities came with me and they're rolling up in the role hierarchy and in the forecast and everything to Mike now. So that's the issue. Now, the intuitive thing would be to just transfer it back to someone else, right? Wrong. I mean, right, because it's intuitive, but don't do that. Do not do that. And this is exactly why I'm sharing the story. So if you take those records, and for some of them, you might want to do that, right? Like for accounts, for example, because somebody else has to take over those customers. They still want to, you know, have somebody German speaking that is in their time zone and whatnot. So there's definitely certain records that we might want to transfer. But there's definitely other records that we do not want to transfer, and opportunities is one of them, especially those closed opportunities. Do not change closed opportunity owners. Don't. Because if you do that, you are messing with historical data. Here's my what if scenario. So if you would take those opportunities, and so when I left, they hired a new person, Michael. He was basically my replacement. He was taking over my customers. He was finishing up some of the opportunities that I had started, but I wasn't able to close on time before I left. So he took over those. And all of those records were transferred to him. But if I would take those closed opportunities and transfer them to Michael in Salesforce, Michael now would be the owner, and it would look like he closed those opportunities. So you're messing with historical data. So let's say this whole adventure into the US would have not worked out for me. And 6 months into it, I would have called Barry and said, hey, Barry, this is horrible. Everything is horrible here. I need a reference letter, and I need a good reference letter, and Mike is not giving it to me. So I need a reference letter from you, please, please, pretty please. And can you, I want to stay in sales. So can you also, you know, put in how amazing I was and how much dollars I sold and whatnot. Barry would go into the system and he wouldn't find anything. because we transferred those records over to Michael and we messed with historical data. He would come back and say, well, Salesforce doesn't show me anything that you did. Michael did all of those things, even though he wasn't even with the company yet. Do not transfer opportunities. Do not transfer closed opportunities in particular. Okay, great. So if I can't do that, how else can we fix it? And Mark, if you want to bring up your idea again, feel free to do so now. Now I will listen to what you said.
Just to change the data behind the scenes.
Yeah, and we can't really do that, right? Because we're messing with historical data. So where things went wrong is thinking that just like I pack up my stuff and I move over to the US, you would do the same thing for my user record. That's where things went wrong, right? What we actually want to do is we want to deactivate EMEA Katrin, that user, and then we want to create a new user, same name, right? Same first name, same last name, same email address, same everything, really. We're kind of creating a duplicate. But this user now has that new role that is rolling up to Mike. I'm starting a new life, right? Think of it that way. And it really was like a new life. So we're leaving the old Katrin behind. We deactivate that Katrin, and we want to be politically correct, right? She's not old. And I wasn't old back then. I'm old now. But let's call her EMEA Katrin. And that deactivated user will hold on to those closed opportunities. And new Katrin, the US Katrin, is starting a new life. And, you know, maybe I'm getting some open opportunities transferred. In my case, it was all cold calling. I really started from nothing. You know, maybe I get some, maybe I don't, but I'm starting new. So that I'm not messing with historical data. And now, for one, we don't have this issue that the $1 million of closed business are rolling up to Mike, right? They're staying with that deactivated Katrin. They continue to roll up to Barry. Barry can send me a reference letter if things are not working out. And this new Katrin is, you know, just creating a new life. Okay. So very important. Be super cautious about transferring closed opportunities. Don't do it. There is, right here with this mass transfer accounts, there literally is a little checkbox, transfer closed opportunities. I don't know. And I literally for years, I tried to figure out what the use case is for this particular checkbox. And I cannot find a valid enough reason to ever check this checkbox because you're messing with historical data. All right, that's my story. And I'm sticking to it. What questions are out there about the story, about the approach, about this rather not intuitive, creating a duplicate user of all things? Okay, very good. Well, then I have some official questions for you, if the slide moves. Here we go. All right. Now, NTO would like to perform an automatic backup of all Salesforce data once a week. Which tool should they choose and why?
The weekly export service, because you could schedule it.
Yes, you can schedule it, and it's about all Salesforce data once a week. Perfect. Excellent. All right, how about number 2? An admin wants to back up the manufacturing industry accounts in her organization before she begins a large import. What tools could she use?
Like a data loader.
Yeah, perfect. Data loader is a good option. Import wizard. is for the import that she's doing, but for the backup, it would be the data loader. Or we could use a report as well and export the report because it's just, a couple of accounts. Perfect. So both of those would be good tools to use.
So that
All
would
right.
be just how many accounts she's wanting to back up then, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So on would that be like an exam question? And so what would be the best approach, a report or data loader?
In that particular case, it would be a choose 2 answers out of the 4 kind of question. And
Oh, okay.
you would not want to use the weekly backup service because the weekly backup service would give you all Salesforce data. You could narrow it down to all of one object, but even that would be too much, right? Because we only want the manufacturing industry accounts, so we don't even want all accounts. And the backup service will take hours and hours until it's finally your turn, and then we pull the backup, and then you still need to, like, it takes too long. It for this use case, it wouldn't make any sense to use the backup service. So the 2 correct answers would be in this case either reports or the data loader.
Oh, so I mean, they wouldn't make you choose between a report or data loader.
Yeah, so in this particular use case, they're equally as good. Let's say that the question would be an admin wants to back up 3 million manufacturing industry accounts in her organization. Now that kind of eliminates the report because the report can't hold that much.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Thank
All
you.
right, sure, yeah, absolutely. Number 3, for CloudKick's cases where product equals other, support representatives must enter a value in the product description custom field to create a case.
Validation rule.
Yeah, perfect. That is a validation rule. Very good. All right, number 4, an admin incorrectly imported a set of records into Salesforce. Oopsie. Which tools can the admin use to remove the records from Salesforce?
A data loader.
Data loader. Yeah, we can delete with the data loader. What other option do we have? There's one other one.
Mass delete.
Perfect. I was just going to say, oops, I slipped. Yes, the mass delete tool is the other option. And again, they're equally as good. So it probably would be on the exam, it probably would be a choose 2 out of the 4 kind of question. All right, very good. Well, we have been working a lot, and now we're kind of moving into analytics. And before we go into reports and dashboards, I would say it is break time. Let me get my timer ready here. All right, let's do 12 minutes, and when we come back, we'll